And sorry for the technical issue. License.
Վերջականապես հաղթարեցինք տեխնիկական խնդիրները։ Շնորհակալ եմ։
Before I start my speech, I would like to inform those present that our meeting is being live streamed, and it will be streamed both in Armenian and in English with a simultaneous interpretation. Therefore, when making your speech, take that into consideration, as well as such discussions, working discussions, speeches within such discussions should be within 3 to 5 minutes. Please take that into consideration as well. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for taking my invitation to be part of this discussion, because today is the day of the pogroms and massacres in the Republic of Azerbaijan, and those forced displaced, and this is the day for the protection of their rights. This is the day when Armenian population was subject to violations and torture by the armed forces of the Republic of Armenia, Azerbaijan. And why they were being murdered is because they were just Armenians and they wanted to live free and with dignity. It is difficult to imagine how much hate there was, how much hatred there was within the Azerbaijan populations, and how much hatred they had, so that hundreds of Sumgait inhabitants did such unhuman activities with axes, with weapons. Azerbaijanis were divided into groups of a number of people. They were entering Armenian settlements, killing Armenians in their houses, also in the streets, making them subject to public humiliation. Because you are representatives from the academia, you can bring more details, more facts, but I want to underline that the massacre of the Armenians, which reminded of the 1915 Armenian genocide in Turkey, had become regular, and this is in the state policy of Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan was having hate and violent speech. There was also I should also mention the case when an Azerbaijani military killed an Armenian with an axe, and such activities are being encouraged at the state level. And the Republic of Azerbaijan, based on all these criminal acts, in 1991 started a military activity against the Armenians, which resulted in losses of human life as well as material losses. This is when it was already admitted that the Republic of Azerbaijan with autonomy was to be recognized, but on the 10th of November 1991, the Republic of Armenia had proclaimed the independence of the Republic of Armenia in line with international law as well as the laws of the former Soviet Union. About 30 years, the Republic of Armenia has promoted so much hatred towards the Armenians that in 2020, when there was the war against the Armenians, we could see a lot of inhuman activities by the Armenians. The Azerbaijani representatives were targeting civilians, kindergartens, schools and hospitals. So today we want to address to the international community and international colleagues so that these criminal activities of the Azerbaijanis against humanity should get to appropriate response and assessment and by the international community. I want to once again mention that as long as there are no mechanisms of accountability for the Azerbaijanis genocide and massacres policies, such crimes against humanity will continue, and in front of your eyes the Azerbaijanis are depriving civilians, children and women from their right to live. Please don't be indifferent and response to this. I want to pass the floor to the participants, to Mr. Melkonian. Please take the floor. Dear colleagues, I think that this meeting is very important. From time to time we should remind the international community about this disaster, and I think the political assessment that has so far been given and has not yet been reported this case as genocide is a mistake also of ours. Of course, massacres, of course, genocides, such formulations could take place that our neighbors, you can see, that are speaking about things that have not happened, including those in Khojalu. They have been formulating this and defining this as not only genocide, but also they are striving and working towards getting some countries having some assessments and statements on these cases. Therefore, I think that our National Assembly should also tackle this issue and give it appropriate assessment and also define it as part of the same chain of genocides, including from February 6 Armenian Tatar wars, and then all starting from 1918, 1920 March, also in Shushi, 1920 June, July, August months, Zangezur events when the Red Army, and together with the Red Army, there was the massacres in the Sunnik region, also in the new era, 1988. We can start from Sumgait pogroms till Baku massacres, all the way to 2016 and 2020 wars with Azerbaijan. All these cases are the same chain of genocides, and we should show it as part of the same chain, and we should condemn the activities of the Azerbaijanis and define them as genocide. I should remind you about the 1948 9 December statement of Raphael Remkin, which clearly states that genocide is the murders based and because of their ethnicity and nationality and religion, which is exactly what happened to our nation in the 20th and 21st centuries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Melkonian, and I pass the floor to the next participant. Dear colleagues, I also want to underline the importance of today's meeting, and it would be good for this not to be just another discussion, because for years we have had many such discussions, and the specialists and experts have given their clear position. Our specialists, for our specialists, it's obvious that what has happened in Sumgait, then in Ganzak, Baku, Aragha, then in during the policies of the Republic of Azerbaijan, all these policies have been clearly genocidal policies towards the Armenian populations, but unfortunately we have not yet defined it as at the state level. We are continuing to go the same path whereas our neighbor is able to represent and define cases, events that have not happened, to define it as so-called genocide. For example, the so-called genocide of Khojalu has been recognized and condemned. Why are our colleagues avoiding using the genocide term when everything is obvious? There was the criminal intent. 48 December UN Convention, Article 2 and 3 are in line and do allow us to insist that these were genocidal activities, and they are trying to compare this with the Armenian genocide by the Turkey, and saying that if you recognize this as genocide, we will be undermining the Armenian genocide by Turkey. But if we look at this objectively, this is the same criminal activity. It is the continuous of the same criminal activity. Even if we take this separately from the Armenian genocide, it still remains genocide, and there could not be double opinion on this. Our professional communities, I should mention, that have already conducted serious research work. The Armenian Genocide Museum Institute has, after long discussions, passed and is still conducting scientific research, and I'm sure very soon we will have the first scientific work on this subject, which will be defended, and the same Museum Research Institute is also formulating a working group to study the crimes by the Republic of Azerbaijan, and all of this allows us to say that also in line with the statute of the International Criminal Court, we can say that what has happened is at least crimes against humanity, and more specifically, these are genocide policies, and the continuation of it we can see both during the 44-day war as well as during the Shushit Declaration. We can see the pan-Turkism points in the Shushit Declaration. So we can all see this, and as long as we don't have political will and we don't define things as they should be, we will not have the moral right to demand from the international community to define this and recognize this as genocide. Thank you, Mr. Manukyan, and please take the floor, Mr. Avedisyan. I would also welcome this meeting, and I would take the floor from my colleagues and say a number of opinions and ideas. You mentioned in your speech that unfortunately the international community have not properly responded to what has happened in Sumgait and will probably also happen in the future. And I think we have a lot to do that we have not yet done. I believe that this meeting of ours is a good opportunity to also discuss what we have not done, so that the academic communities as well as other people who are working on this matter should have done. I believe, first of all, that Azerbaijan has a state program to reject Armenians. Do we have an state program, state concept to prevent and stop the Azerbaijani policies? Do we have anything appropriate in this regard? And people who are here now have a lot to do, and this work to be done needs to be coordinated and regulated, and I believe that the National Assembly can help form certain programs For example, my colleague already said that the Genocide Museum Institute is already doing discussions on a number of matters. All of this have the need for academic research, and we don't yet have on the table any comprehensive research work based on which we will be able to tomorrow present to the international community what has in fact happened. And we should, when defining these programs, we should also involve not only the Armenian professionals, specialists, but also international specialists, also international community that are working, specialists that are working on the minority rights, on ethnicity rights, and we will have a very serious document which will become a serious basis to have a certain policy, and based on policy we will have a number of activities that will be able to raise this issue on international forums, and we can hope that our voice will be heard and our matters will be worth discussing on international forums. Otherwise we'll be continuing to condemn what we have been condemning for dozens of years and nothing more. Therefore I call you to take our discussions to a practical stage and understand what we should do. There are specialists, there are professionals that are working in different institutions. We can coordinate their work, understand what we should do and how to move forward. So much, this much. Thank you, Mr. Avedisian. I should mention as a Deputy of the National Assembly that I am ready to cooperate on any matter, for any statement, for any legal act and draft, and I believe that as a result of this meeting we can come to a decision and I can take my own step as a Deputy of the National Assembly. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Underlining the importance of today's meeting, I would like to mention two facts, two things. In science there is such an understanding, we should say not only what has happened but also why it has happened. And if we look at the policy of the Azerbaijanis from 1988, we can see some logic that it is not just doing whatever it can, be it organizing massacres of the Armenians or anything else, but it is all part of certain policy program, and any such step can be imagined. If we look on all the steps, we can imagine and understand the next steps of theirs, and also we can understand the chain that they are following, and this can be seen from the 1988 Sumgait and Baku events, both in Artsakh and outside the Artsakh territory, how they are striking, and we can see that already from 1990s we have this biological resistance, because when they are hitting and striking us, we are resisting or reacting rather than resisting. So we can basically look at their activities and logically foresee the next steps, the next strikes, and we can also understand that in this genocidal policy we can see that they have brought to a new level their cultural genocide policy as well. If before they were just destroying any Armenian territories, now the cultural genocide is a state policy, and they are not just destroying, they are taking and making theirs the culture what they have taken over, and they are trying to change the history. And for the Azerbaijanis, the history has become a tool that has become a military, strategic, political tool for the Azerbaijanis. And all this chain of activities that Mr. Melkonyan represented should be, from our side, also should have a response, should have our activities, so that we can also respond and react to protect the cultural heritage as well. Thank you very much. Mr. Khachaturian, I would like to pass the floor to you. Thank you very much for the invitation. Of course, here, of course, I would. My name is Vilen Khachaturian. I am from the State Government Academy, Government Faculty, and from this point of view, I'm also preparing the new staff, the new specialists for strategic governance, and I would like to speak about this from another point of view, because here we have the following problem, and I would like to mention the following. I would like to understand what the historians and other specialists, what kind of approaches they have, and they have just presented right now here. Even we have terminology differences, but we should call it genocide, massacre, pogrom, or etc. First we need to understand, can we achieve to the unity on this, so that we don't have a publication where the term genocide is in any ways put under doubt. Also, I wanted to touch another point. Let's imagine I'm not an Armenian, I was not part of the 44-day war. So let's imagine I'm not Armenian, because I had this question also during the war. I wanted to approach this matter from the point of view, for example, the Europeans. What are the Europeans thinking when we have clashes? Is it a national issue, or there's an issue, or there's a purpose of the Europeans to establish peace? We'll be speaking about Sumgay, they'll be speaking about Khojalu, they'll be using the PR politics to go further. Our diplomacy will be weaker, their diplomacy will be stronger. Is this what is going to happen, and how the foreigners see us, and whether or not our scientific community is able to, on the same level, react to whatever they say, to their statements, to counter them, to publish in journals, scientific journals, counter facts that will break their facts, because for 30 years we are not putting these issues on the agenda. Sometimes we take into consideration the political agenda, the diplomacy. We try to also understand how to continue the same policy over time when people change also, but we have to ask ourselves the question whether or not on doctrine or strategic level we have this one unified thinking, including when it comes to Armenia and diaspora thinking. Do we have the same thinking? Are we on the same page? And this is where our facts very often do not allow us to achieve or to be stronger than them. Any Azerbaijan thinks about this. They consider Armenians as enemies, and Azerbaijanis in the science community think how they can push forward in any foreign institutions, put forward their thesis, their scientists, so that the Armenians later will not be able to have their counterfacts in the same institute, in the same fora, whether or not they will be able to speak about the territorial integrity. Maybe I'm speaking longer, sorry for this. So whenever there is an issue of territorial integrity, they are trying to push their agenda. And when there is an issue of national determination, we are not able to break the chain, break the ice, and push our agenda. And I believe that our scientific centers and any Armenian scientist should be able to have all the counterfacts and should know the description of the vulnerable points of the Azerbaijani side, to be able to counter the Azerbaijani arguments, including on economic matters, governance matters. In the brain of everyone should have in the red line this idea, this thinking on how to be able to counter the Azerbaijani facts. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will not be too long. I will save some time. I agree with our colleagues. The subject needs to be further discussed and researched, to say that during these years nothing has been done is incorrect, but probably not sufficient has been done, because we ourselves have seen what has happened, the events, but what we are going to leave to our coming generations. I believe, yes, we should multidisciplinarily study everything and have a strategy. We have to clearly know that after years, when really our coming generations will be learning from history, but we might not know exactly what kind of disaster has happened. Therefore, we should have a clear policy and strategy to be able to, in the future, prevent such events in general. This much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And Mr. Stepanyan, I would like to pass the floor to you. Thank you very much for the invitation. My colleagues already mentioned the purpose of today's meeting and what should be done. And yes, I believe we should first be clear for ourselves and have strategic action points for ourselves. At state level, we should have clear instructions that the state is having the following programs, propaganda programs against Azerbaijan, in order to take steps to recognize the events as genocide and what scientists should do. And it is very important what ourselves should do and clarify our activities, actions, what we want, and the issue should be internationalized for to restore the violated rights of the Armenians in the so-called Azerbaijan, and there should be also, from the propaganda point of view, PR point of view, we should also be speaking about ethnocultural protection, and we should also be speaking about Hadrut. Hadrut had its own unique, beautiful ethnic, cultural aspects, subculture, and it is now condemned to destruction by the Azerbaijanis. Same is about Shaumian. It's very similar, and this is important to note. And in our PR activities, we should always speak about this. We should do everything to, at maximum, protect Hadrut, people living in Hadrut, who are part of the Artsakhi Armenians. We should do everything to protect Hadrut before we return to Hadrut, and we should hope that this will happen. I should make a comment that in 9 November famous document, it's written that the refugees have to be returned, which means that the Hadrut population should be returned to Hadrut and Shushi population should be returned to Shushi. Therefore, let's speak about this. Let's speak about this, and I welcome this initiative. It's in the past periods in the media, including the negative historical events and related to Azerbaijan, are either not in the media or are not sufficiently in the media. They might be in the media one day and the next day it will disappear from the media. So what we need systemic approach. This we already mentioned, and we need to work on two directions. One is the international community, and it's not a secret that the international community has double, sometimes multiple standards, and speaking to our international colleagues also from the same sphere as ourselves, it is very often very difficult to make them understand the Armenian hatred in the Turkish-Azerbaijani tandem and the depth of the hatred towards Armenians, because the international colleagues have also seen wars, they have also seen enemies, but it's impossible for them to imagine that the armies and political systems can be in war. But how can this hatred be against the people exist? It's very difficult to imagine this hatred for the Armenians, and here we have a lot to do, because when the issue with the Armenian genocide is more or less formulated. When it comes to the Azerbaijanis, we have been weak on this, and the opposite, it's the Azerbaijanis who are trying to blame us and speak against us. And the second matter is that our state political agenda. How is this issue part of our state agenda today? Yes, there are different scientific public discussions, but when it comes to discussing having relations, friendly relations, here I don't see in any ways in the agenda this issue in the agenda, because to be honest, yes, it is possible to, if not be friends, then at least be neighbors, but only if you have already recognized your own loss and have been able to take lessons from your own history. If our neighbor is going to reject the history, then we will not be able to have sincere neighborhood, and the opposite. We today see how our enemy neighbor is having more ambitions towards us, and we therefore should have systemic approach. If we have a systemic approach with scientific, state, public, civil, legal spheres, if we have clear agenda from point A to point B, if we have clear strategy, then we will be able to take this competitive information field, will be able to protect our interests. Otherwise, in a number of episodes, we will come for certain dates, we will have meetings, but we'll never have systemic results. Thank you very much. One comment when it comes to episodic responses. Even with this, we are sometimes very late. When two Azerbaijani deputies, members of parliament, were in Armenia, they visited in Yerevan, Blue Mosque. They went to Azerbaijan, made statements, but I did not see quick operational reaction from Armenia. We did not have appropriate timely reaction from Armenian side. Even in these small episodic matters, we are sometimes very late. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I would also like to welcome all the participants of this meeting. And I believe that such meetings, we are having them a bit late, because today is a number of geopolitical changes are taking place in the world, including regional and macro-regional changes in the region, and they are dictating us to be more appropriate, quicker when responding to this type of events. Unfortunately, we are just being post factum, we just speak about facts, and we just react. From this point of view, I believe that it's very important that I'm also speaking in the same lines with our colleagues, that we should not be just reacting to the Azerbaijanis anti-Armenian PR, but we should also have clear state national policy strategy, which we don't yet have. We have not yet answered the question where we are going, what type of state we are building. These type of issues are in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, but we don't yet know clearly what is our state national policy and how it should be developed. And we should first and foremost think about this as representatives of the science community. We should be able to take this national ideology, national state strategy, and after then we will be able to answer the remaining questions recently we hosted the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Artsakh, Mr. Babayan, in the National Science Academy. We raised a number of similar questions, and in this context it was very important to speak and clarify the national state strategy, and which is very important, which is very much related to the matters we are discussing today, because Azerbaijan in these times and throughout its existence of 102 years, Azerbaijan has always been using this policy, which is very well known. They are trying to make others' histories theirs. They are declaring others' histories as theirs. But in this context, we have not yet been able to have our own state policy, because all of this is being done in Azerbaijan at state level, at the level of state policy, at the support of the state. And to say the more, in 1918, we had our response. We had a package for responding to the Azerbaijani policy. We presented it to the National Security Council, to the National Assembly, but this package was not considered further after the 1918 events, and until now this issue is still pending, and our chair is doing a lot of steps in this regard. Our chair is for the study of the Caucasus, and it will be us tackling this issue with your support, but also we expect from the National Assembly, from the government, from the state structures to support us, at least just to support us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present our opinions as well. We can have a broader discussion in the future, and I believe that the 44-day war gives us a platform, gives us a reason to speak about these issues every day, not on individual cases, not from date to date, but every day. This should be our work, because our enemy, our opponent, is doing this every day, every hour, using all types of technologies, so we should do the same. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Zorabian. Thank you very much. I will take the floor. It's a very important event. It's a very important meeting. Many of our colleagues have already worked with us in the National Assembly or in scientific meetings. We have always spoken about these topics, but I agree with Mr. Mirkonyan that the National Assembly, in the National Assembly we had discussions, but the National Assembly did not pass any decision about the genocide committed by Azerbaijan. There was some discussions, formulas, but there was no further follow-up decision, including at the state level. I agree with my colleagues. There is no concept paper by the state to recognize these events as genocide by Azerbaijanis. Every time we speak, every time we discuss, this remains at the level of discussions. I will have to ask Ms. Tovmasyan to follow up and to state the 1988 genocide by the Azerbaijanis, as well as expressions of pan-Turkism from 1905 to all the way to now, the continuation of pan-Turkism policy and the Azerbaijani genocide of the 1988 towards Armenians. All of this should be discussed, and I would like Ms. Tovmasyan to follow up. Also, it is important to discuss and follow up on the rights of the forced displaced persons, which started from the Sumgait pogroms all the way now in 6 phases. It was first in Sumgait, Shushi, Kirovabad, Khandar, Tashkestan, all the way to 1988, November, December, then to 1989, July, August, then January 13 to January 20, Baku massacres and all these forced displacements took place, etc., etc., etc. And the rights of these forced displaced persons, the issue of their rights and discussing of and protecting their rights is very important. And when we see the occupation of the Armenians, of the Azerbaijanis, the occupation of the Azerbaijanis, of the Armenian territories, and also the issue of the protection of the rights of the Armenians living in these territories, including after the 44-day war, it is very important. And I join my colleagues, and I would like to offer my colleagues that in the international arenas they should work on this matter, and internationally they should raise this issue, make so that it's not just a matter of discussion, but it is a policy, because the Azerbaijanis hatred policy towards the Armenians is set and is being continuous. We should also have our policy. We should not just be discussing it. We should all know that the Azerbaijan is continuing Turkey's pan-Turkism policy. It is a country that is committing genocide, and any country that commits genocide towards them, the reaction of the international community should be different. To say, in other words, first it should be recognized that Azerbaijan is a country, a state that commits genocide, and then take further steps in this respect. Thank you very much. I would also like to join my colleagues, and I would also like to thank for organizing this event, and I would like to mention that all the opinions that we mentioned are realistic and acceptable, but it is also important to mention one important fact. Very often our activities, also scientists' activities, are hindered by the Turkish and Azerbaijani side when we are trying to present the Armenian opinion point of view in the international communities. Our articles are being vetoed or are made taboo by the Azerbaijanis and Turks and are not allowed to publish them, and this shows how organized the Azerbaijanis and Turks are in this matter. As opposed to ours, we are not able to have a straightforward, clear policy that will allow us to have respective steps and be able to protect our rights, especially in the international community, international fora. I have very often discussed this issue with our colleagues, international colleagues, and they say that the Azerbaijanis are more organized, especially when it comes to their PRs. They are very organized. Unfortunately, we are losing to the Azerbaijan PR, and this is a serious issue, and our international colleagues are advising us to be more active, be able to react, bring counterfacts, and Armenian scientists are doing serious steps, and if we have state support, we'll be able to make our steps more successful. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miss Melkonian. Indeed, we should pass the floor to Mr. Stepanyan before I summarize our discussions, but if anyone else wants to summarize, let me know. Mr. Stepanyan, take the floor. Good morning. I apologize for being late, and I join my colleagues I welcome this event, and even though, to be honest, I was late, I was very much late, I still think that in these conditions it's never late, and issues that have accumulated in front of us, we will be able to jointly solve. As for the Azerbaijan's Armenian hatred policy, I should say that this policy is based not just now, but it comes from the Tatar-Armenian clashes, from the times of Tatar-Armenian clashes, and it has become at the state policy level since the 1918 when this artificial organization called Azerbaijan was formulated in 1918. Since then it is at state level, and since then they are using the strategy that they are using against the Armenians and against the Armenian nation. This policy, this strategy is called the Great Azerbaijan concept, which is part of the pan-Turkish concept. And this strategy is based, first of all, on the genocide of the ethnic inhabitants, including particularly the Armenians, to displace them from their historic land by way of genocides. And up until the Sumgait genocide, this was the policy of the Azerbaijanis. And unfortunately, this continues until now, as including in the form of cultural genocide. What have we done against this strategy of the Azerbaijanis? Unfortunately, we have to accept that since the day of the Armenians' independence, we have not yet defined a clear strategy. We don't have the concept by which we'll be able to respond to the Azerbaijani fakes. I have recently written a work about the Azerbaijan-Turkish fakes, and I realized something horrible, that against us in 1 year, Azerbaijani Science Academy has published more than 60 works, scientific works, most of them in foreign languages, very few in Azerbaijani language, whereas ours, what have we done against this? Unfortunately, we have not done anything against this, because this policy, this information policy, has not been part of our state security system. There were no clear instructions, and what has been done at the level and initiative of our academy, Institute of History, Oriental Institute. We've done it on our level. Our scientists, our historians have done their work, but there's no such state policy and strategy so that we will know how and in what concept framework our works should fit. This is the issue, and such events should be guiding our state politicians, so that finally we have the strategy, to counter the Azerbaijani policy, which is now active in all ways, especially at the information level. We have to prevent, stop, and exceed them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Stepanyan. I would like to mention one more idea. This was also discussed about the Great Turan idea. As an economist, I should mention one idea. I have noticed one idea also, emphasizing historical categories. They have now reached to the Great Turan idea. Now we are discussing ethnic questions. We are speaking about certain events, but yet they are being faster and taking bigger steps. They're creating an airport which has the capacity of 190 million, which is part of their policy. When our paths cross with Turkey and Azerbaijan, this becomes also part of their policy, of their model for genocide, for massacres, and which is they are trying to push forward also at economic level because when there is an issue of developing infrastructures, it will be very difficult to break this movement with historic facts. Whenever they have huge financial programs, it will be difficult to counter them with historical facts. Therefore, we should have parallel interdisciplinary model to fight them, be it with historic, economic and other disciplines should be taken parallelly. And probably you might have counter ideas with me, but which we can further discuss later, but we should come to a cooperation model which will be multi-interdisciplinary. Thank you very much, Mr. Khachatryan, and I will sum up our meeting. Dear present, the representatives of the Academy, I once again thank you very much for being present on this very important day. We should not forget our past when we are having any friendship relations with Azerbaijan. This should in no way stop us from going further up to another level when it comes to determination. And I should also note that political peace era since it has started, there have been a number of activities that are in no ways part of serving the peace agenda, be that the aggression of Azerbaijan in Artsakh yesterday when they were forcing the population leave their homes if they don't want to be forcibly displaced. This is just a sign that Azerbaijan is continuing their genocide policy against us, and no matter how much we try to speak on other international fora about the peace agenda, this peace agenda seems to be one-sided, whereas peace cannot be one-sided. We should understand where we are going in this path and how we are formulating our national objectives. It is always very important, at least in written format, I should understand what is stopping us from having this important document to create about the state national strategy. But I will also mention that I myself in the parliament always speak about the anti-Armenian policy of the Azerbaijanis. I always speak with the international institutions. I'm sending them a lot of letters asking them to respond to this or that case or event and asking their support and assessment. And sometimes they give their assessment, sometimes they are silent. But I am always, as a human rights defender, as the chairman of the Armenian Parliament, of the Standing Committee of Protection of Human Rights and Public Affairs, I believe this is my job to continue this promotion, and I will always ask the representatives of the academia that if you have any plan of actions, any steps, clearly, please delegate them to me. I will be the person to do the best, to do my most, to fill the gaps as much as possible. Better late than never. Thank you very much for today.